Friday the 13th, and tonight's headlines read like a nightmare. Calvin the Reformer folds his arms. Hurricane Gilbert. Now so intense, birds use him as a toilet. And French army declares Nancy not for sale. Plus, coming up, when crocodiles laugh, do they swallow their own faces? Those are the headlines. For the record, that was not a warning shot.
It news bang. Reality check at the Rehoboth beach of rhetoric. P2 1541.
Breaking news from Geneva, where local authorities have reported a mass outbreak of predestination. The culprit? None other than John Calvin, the French theologian who's just returned from a 3-year vacation in Strasbourg. Eyewitnesses claim Calvin arrived in the city wielding a large book and shouting, "Who wants some sovereignty?"
Local resident François Fromage told our reporters, "One minute I was enjoying my fondue, the next I felt an overwhelming sense of divine election. It's quite unsettling, really."
Calvin has wasted no time in implementing his new system of Christian theology, which includes mandatory frowning and a citywide ban on free will. The newly established consistory, a sort of spiritual police force, has been patrolling the streets, handing out citations for excessive joy and insufficient predestination.
Day 2 1988.
Breaking news from the world of superstition as Friday the 13th strikes again. Reports are flooding in of chaos erupting across the nation as ladders spontaneously combust, mirrors shatter without provocation, and black cats engage in synchronized backflips.
In London, a man identified only as Unlucky Pete claims he's been struck by lightning 17 times since breakfast. "I knew I shouldn't have got out of bed," Pete wheezed from his hospital gurney. "But my bed tried to eat me. So I had no choice."
Meanwhile, in Birmingham, an entire office building has been evacuated after a colony of rabid rabbit's feet went on a rampage. "They were supposed to be lucky," sobbed Doris Fiddlewick, head of HR, "but they just kept multiplying and attacking people's ankles."
The government has issued a statement urging citizens to remain calm and avoid walking under ladders, opening umbrellas indoors, or making eye contact with magpies. The Prime Minister, speaking from inside a protective circle of salt, declared, "We will not be cowed by this diabolical date. Stiff upper lips, everyone."
1914.
The German 6th and 7th Armies have launched a surprise assault on the French city of Nancy. Eyewitnesses report that the Germans, armed with nothing but pointy helmets and an overwhelming sense of entitlement, charged up the hills surrounding the city like a herd of angry bratwursts.
The French, caught off guard but not without their wits, quickly fortified their positions using nothing but baguettes and an impressive array of cheese wheels. Local fromager Jean-Pierre Camembert exclaimed, "Mon Dieu! I never thought my Roquefort would save France."
German soldiers, frustrated by their inability to breach the French defences, resorted to hurling insults and poorly pronounced French phrases. One German private was overheard shouting, "Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderbeer."
The failure to capture Nancy has dealt a crushing blow to the German Schlieffen Plan, which apparently involved capturing every city with a girl's name. Field Marshal von Schlieffen was quoted as saying, "Drat! Foiled again by those pesky Frenchmen and their delicious, impenetrable cheeses."
Madei's News Bang. News from the future brought to you by the past.
And now, with a forecast as unpredictable as a squirrel on espresso, here's our weather guru, Shakanaka Giles, to enlighten us on tomorrow's meteorological mayhem.
Well, look alive, weather watchers. We're in for a right old autumnal tango tomorrow. starting in the southeast, where the leaves are already doing their best impression of a teenager's bedroom floor. Expect a light drizzle, the kind that seeps into your socks like a nosy neighbour. But fear not, the sun will eventually poke through just in time for the lunchtime rush. Swinging up to the Midlands, we've got a bit of a mixed bag. Cloudy in the morning with a chance of light showers, like a toddler with a leaky sippy cup. But by the afternoon, the skies will clear, allowing the birds to resume their usual chorus of sod off to the neighbourhood cats. And let's not forget our friends in the north. They'll be basking in a bit of an Indian summer, with temperatures reaching a balmy 18 degrees. That's just warm enough to consider wearing shorts, but only if you're a true Scotsman with a penchant for knee-high socks. Tying a bow on this weather report, it's a classic case of 4 seasons in one day. So keep those umbrellas handy, and don't forget to check the forecast for any updates on the upcoming harvest moon. And that's all the weather.
(1914).
And now, a century ago today, the Battle of Nancy raged as German forces attempted to breach French defences. The French, utilising the high ground, repelled the assault, dealing a blow to German ambitions. This victory proved crucial in stabilising the Western Front, though at great cost to the city and its inhabitants. Acts of valour were recorded on both sides as the battle unfolded. For more on this historic engagement, we go now to our war correspondent, Brian Bastable. Brian?
The air is thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder, the earth trembling beneath the feet of the relentless titans of war. The French army, the guardians of the sacred soil of Nancy, are dug in, resolute, determined to defend their beloved city. The horizon is illuminated with the fiery breath of the German guns, their metallic roars piercing the ear-shattering silence. A hail of lead rains down upon the French positions, each bullet whispering a deadly lullaby. The French, however, remain unfazed. They stand their ground, weapons in hand, a wall of blue against the encroaching tide of steel and iron. The mud beneath them, dyed with the blood of the fallen, serves as a grim reminder of the steep cost of victory. The air is filled with the thunderous crash of artillery, the deadly whine of bullets, and the anguished cries of the dying. The wounded writhe in agony, their screams a discordant symphony to the grim dance of war. Yet amidst the chaos, there is order. The French, like a well-oiled machine, methodically return fire, their bullets tearing through the ranks of the German invaders. The ground is soon sown with the bodies of the fallen, a gruesome testament to the brutal effectiveness of the French defense. The German forces, undaunted, continue their relentless assault. They push forward, wave upon wave of soldiers falling to the withering French fire. But for every French soldier that falls, 2 more rise to take his place. The air is filled with the smoke of battle, a noxious fog that chokes and blinds. The horizon is obscured, the world reduced to a hellish landscape of mud, blood, and death. Yet amidst the chaos, the French hold firm. They stand as a bulwark against the tide of war, their resolve unbroken, their spirits unbowed. And so the battle rages on, a brutal, unyielding stalemate. The French, entrenched on their sacred soil, refuse to yield. The Germans, driven by the madness of war, refuse to retreat. The air is filled with the cacophony of war, a symphony of death and destruction. The earth trembles beneath the feet of the titans of war, a grim reminder of the hellish reality of the battlefield. This is the Battle of Grand Couronne, a testament to the unyielding spirit of the French army, a monument to the brutal reality of war. The battle rages on, the echoes of gunfire a grim reminder of the cost of freedom. And so, as the sun sets on the battlefield, the war continues. The French, their lines unbroken, their spirits unbowed, stand resolute. The Germans, their ranks decimated, their resolve unshaken, continue their relentless assault. The battle rages on, a brutal, unyielding stalemate. The war continues, a grim reminder of the hellish reality of the battlefield. This is Brian Barstable, reporting live from the front lines of the Battle of Grand Couronne. The smoke, the blood, the chaos all around me. The war, it seems, never ends.
2008.
On this day, Delhi was rocked by a series of synchronized explosions that left at least 20 dead and many more injured. The Indian Mujahideen claimed responsibility for this act of extremist violence, using crude but deadly ammonium nitrate bombs. The attacks exposed glaring security lapses and prompted a major overhaul of India's counter-terrorism efforts. For more on this story, we go to our crime correspondent Ken Schitt.
I'm standing here in the smouldering aftermath of what can only be described as a clusterfuck of biblical proportions. Delhi, India's capital, has been rocked by 5 synchronized bomb blasts, leaving at least 20 poor souls dead and countless others wishing they were. The perpetrators, a bunch of nutjobs calling themselves the Indian Mujahideen. These cowardly bastards, with their heads so far up their own asses they can see daylight, claim they're fighting for justice. Well, let me tell you something, sunshine. There's no justice in blowing up innocent people while they're out buying fucking groceries. These sick puppies used ammonium nitrate bombs with integrated circuits and timers. It's like they got their terrorist playbook from a goddamn Acme catalogue. But make no mistake, this isn't some cartoon. This is real life and real people are dead. The government's scratching its collective ass, wondering how these shitheads slipped through the cracks. Well, here's a newsflash. When your intelligence is about as sharp as a sack of wet mice, this is what happens. To the Indian Mujahideen, I say this. You're not warriors, you're not soldiers, you're just a bunch of spineless, gutless wonders who couldn't fight your way out of a paper bag without a bomb. You want to make a statement? Try using your words like big boys instead of playing with explosives like demented toddlers. This is Ken Schitt, reporting from the front lines of humanity's endless capacity for fuckwittery. Back to you in the studio.
1919.
And on this day in 1919, Boston's finest traded their truncheons for placards, plunging the city into 4 days of anarchy. The police strike ended with 9 dead and accusations of Bolshevik sympathies flying faster than a speeding bullet. It seems the boys in blue had developed a sudden fondness for red, at least according to their critics. The state militia stepped in, proving that sometimes it takes an army to do a policeman's job. In the end, Boston learned a valuable lesson. When the thin blue line goes on strike, chaos is just a looted shop window away. Joining us now with more on this historical hullabaloo is our political correspondent, Hardiman Pesto.
Martin, I'm here in Boston, where the streets are finally quiet after 4 days of chaos. The police strike has ended, but not before 9 people lost their lives and accusations of Bolshevism ran rampant.
Pesto, can you give us a clear picture of what's happening there?
Certainly, Martin. I'm standing next to a rather stern-looking gentleman who claims to be the new face of law and order in Boston. Sir, could you introduce yourself?
I'm Commissioner Edwin Upton Curtis, and I won't stand for any more of this union nonsense.
Pesto, are you telling me you're actually with Commissioner Curtis?
That's right, Martin. He's been kind enough to take time out of his busy schedule to speak with us.
And what exactly has the Commissioner been doing to resolve this crisis?
Well, Martin, he's been very proactive. He's fired all the striking officers and is in the process of hiring replacements. Isn't that right, Commissioner?
Absolutely. We won't have any Lenin-loving rabble-rousers on our force.
Pesto, Are you aware that Commissioner Curtis is notoriously press-shy and hasn't given a single interview since the strike began?
Well, Martin, I suppose I'm just that good at my job.
Or perhaps you're talking to a street sweeper in a fancy hat. Ask him about the specific demands of the striking officers.
Certainly. Commissioner, what were the main grievances of the striking officers?
They wanted more money for less work. Plain and simple. Bunch of lazy good-for-nothings, if you ask me.
Pesto, that doesn't sound like the real Commissioner Curtis. He's known for his nuanced understanding of the situation.
Well, Martin, perhaps the stress of the situation has affected his usual diplomacy.
Or perhaps you're not actually talking to Commissioner Curtis at all. Pesto, where exactly are you right now?
I'm in the heart of Boston, Martin, right outside the police headquarters.
And what does this building look like?
It's a grand old building, Martin, very official looking.
Does it happen to have a large sign that says, "Ye Old Boston Tea Shoppy" on it?
Well, now that you mention it...
Pesto, you're not at police headquarters, are you?
I may have made a slight navigational error, Martin.
And I suppose your Commissioner Curtis is actually the shop owner?
Name's Gus, actually. Would you like to try our new Bolshevik blend?
Pesto, thank you for that illuminating report on the Boston police strike. Next time, perhaps try striking up a conversation with someone who's actually involved in the story.
News bang. We're no joke. We're just factual, baby. 2005.
For a report on a peculiar digital plague that infected the virtual world, we turn to our science correspondent, Calamity Prenderville. Calamity, what's this about a computer game pandemic?
Good evening, tech enthusiasts. Today, we're diving into the digital realm of disease with a tale that'll make your microchips tingle. On this day in 2005, a British innovation in virtual epidemiology took the gaming world by storm. Quite literally.
The online game World of Warcraft experienced what we're calling the digital lurgy, a software bug, courtesy of Blighty's finest programmers at Teacup Technologies, created an unintended pandemic simulation. Players found their virtual alter egos struck down by a mysterious ailment that spread faster than gossip at a WI meeting.
This digital disease, dubbed corrupted blood, was meant to be confined to a specific area, much like how my Uncle Nigel tries to keep his ferret collection in the shed. But like Uncle Nigel's ferrets, it escaped and ran amok.
The virtual plague spread faster than you can say fish and chips, as players unknowingly carried the infection to different parts of the game world. It was chaos. Virtual characters were dropping like flies at a bug zapper convention.
But here's the kicker. This digital disaster became a goldmine for epidemiologists. They used it to study how real people might behave during an actual pandemic. Who knew that watching pixelated people panic could be so scientifically valuable?
Some players tried to contain the outbreak, acting like digital Florence Nightingales. Others, bless their binary hearts, became virtual typhoid Marys, spreading the disease faster than butter on hot crumpets.
So, next time you're battling digital dragons, remember, you might just be participating in cutting-edge British epidemiological research. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go disinfect my keyboard. This is Calamity Prenderville, signing off from the front lines of the Pixel Plague.
D. News bang. Blasting through the barricades of deception with an air horn of fact. 1993.
And now, a seismic shift in the musical landscape as Nirvana unleashes their third and final studio album, In Utero. This sonic assault, ladies and gentlemen, is not for the faint of heart. Kurt Cobain's lyrical prowess delves into the depths of human despair, while the band's raw, uncompromising sound threatens to shatter speakers worldwide. Will this be the album that finally makes grunge palatable for afternoon tea? For more on this earth-shattering release, we turn to our culture correspondent, Smithsonian Moss.
Now, at this point of the evening, we welcome listeners on FM who've just joined us.
Whoa, folks, gather round. It's your girl Smithsonia Moss here to give you the lowdown on the most tubular, rad, and straight-up lit album release in the history of grunge. Nirvana's In Utero, baby. Now, I know what you're thinking. Smithsonia, why are you yelling? And I'm like, why not, bro? It's Nirvana, the kings of yelling. So, 31 years ago today, Kurt Cobain and the gang dropped this sonic bombshell on the world. And let me tell you, it was like a middle finger to the mainstream. I mean, these guys were like, you know what? We're gonna make an album that's gonna make your ears bleed, and you're gonna love it. And, oh boy, did we ever. Now, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, folks. In Utero was like a raw, uncut, and unapologetic punch in the face. It was like Kurt Cobain took all his angst, all his anger, and all his frustration, put it in a blender, hit puree, and out came this masterpiece. I mean, who needs production quality when you can just scream your lungs out and call it a day? And let's talk about Steve Albini, the producer who made it all happen. I mean, this guy was like the mad scientist of music production. He took Nirvana's sound, threw it in a blender, added some distortion, and voila, you got In Utero, an album that's like the musical equivalent of a bad acid trip. But you know what? It worked. It was like the perfect storm of sound, a beautiful mess of noise that captured the essence of a generation. I mean, who needs melody when you can just have feedback and screaming? It's like they say, if it's not loud, it's not worth playing. And let's be real, folks. In Utero was like the ultimate middle finger to the music industry. I mean, these guys were like, you want us to make a commercial album? Screw you, we're gonna make an album that's gonna make your ears bleed. And, oh boy, did they ever. So, there you have it, folks. Nirvana's In Utero. The album that changed the game, the album that defined a generation, and the album that proved that you don't need talent to make great music. Just kidding, Kurt Cobain was a genius, but you get the point. That's all for today, folks. Tune in next time when we'll be talking about something else that's totally not relevant to your life.
Nachtenishkachenses. News bang, the sweet siren song of honesty, drowning out the false melodies of distraction. Pre to 1541.
French theologian John Calvin has made a triumphant return to Geneva after 3 years in exile. The prodigal son of Protestant reform swept back into the city, armed with a newfound zeal for restructuring the very fabric of Christian society. One can only imagine the fervour with which he unpacked his theological luggage. Calvin's return marked the beginning of a new era in Geneva, transforming it into a veritable Protestant paradise, or purgatory, depending on one's perspective. For more on this historical homecoming and its repercussions, we turn to our religious affairs correspondent, Pastor Kevin Monstrance.
Good evening, my dear flock. Before we dive into tonight's historical homily, I must share with you the latest exploits of our beloved producer, Martin Mischief Bang. Just yesterday, I caught him trying to replace the communion wine with his homemade elderberry moonshine. When confronted, he claimed it was all part of his plan to liven up the service. Honestly, that man's antics could make even John Calvin crack a smile. Speaking of the great reformer, tonight we journey back to the year 1541 when Calvin made his triumphant return to Geneva after a 3-year exile. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering, Pastor Kevin, what on earth did Calvin do to get himself kicked out of Geneva in the first place? Well, let me tell you, it's a tale of theological tussles, political pushback, and one very stubborn Frenchman. You see, Calvin and his partner in reform, William Fiery Farel, had been causing quite a stir in Geneva with their strict moral codes and disciplinary measures. They were like the 16th century equivalent of the fun police. The citizens of Geneva who were used to a bit more wiggle room in their religious and political lives, weren't too keen on these new rules. It was like trying to put a leash on a pack of wild hyenas. Tensions reached a boiling point when Calvin and Farel refused to compromise on issues like the frequency of communion and the use of unleavened bread. The city council, fed up with their inflexibility, gave them the boot in 1538. Calvin packed his bags and headed off to Strasbourg, while Farel set off on a one-man mission to reform every bakery in Switzerland. Now, here's where our joke comes in. A few weeks into his exile, Calvin receives a letter from a friend back in Geneva. The friend writes, "Dear John, you won't believe what's happening here. The city council has replaced you with a new reformer, a chap named Jean-Claude Van Damme. He's got the whole city doing the splits during sermons." Calvin, perplexed, writes back, "Jean-Claude Van Damme, the actor? Are you sure you haven't confused him with someone else?" His friend replies, No, it's definitely him. He's even incorporated his famous roundhouse kick into the liturgy. The people love it. Months go by, and Calvin continues to receive updates about the Van Damme Reformation in Geneva. Apparently, the actor-turned-reformer has introduced a new form of worship that involves high-intensity interval training and protein shakes. The city council is thrilled with the increased attendance and the newfound muscles of the congregation. Meanwhile, in Strasbourg, Calvin is hard at work refining his theological ideas and writing his magnum opus, Institutes of the Christian Religion. He's determined to create a systematic theology so airtight that even Martin Bang couldn't poke holes in it. 3 years later, Calvin receives an invitation from the Geneva City Council to return and resume his role as chief reformer. Turns out Jean-Claude Van Damme had run off to Hollywood to star in a new action flick called Kickboxer Priest. The city was in desperate need of some good old-fashioned Calvinist discipline. So, Calvin makes his way back to Geneva, ready to implement his reform vision for the church and society. He establishes the consistory, a sort of 16th century spiritual SWAT team to enforce church discipline and keep the citizens in line. He also introduces a new liturgy that sadly does not include any roundhouse kicks. The people of Geneva, though initially resistant, gradually come to accept Calvin's reforms. They realize that while his methods may be strict, they do provide a sense of order and stability in a chaotic world. Plus, they figure it's better to have Calvin's stern gaze watching over them than to risk another visit from Jean-Claude Van Damme. And so, my friends, Calvin's return to Geneva in 1541 marked the beginning of a new era in the city's religious and political life. His ideas would go on to shape the Reformed tradition and influence countless churches and societies around the world, all thanks to a little persistence, a lot of theological brilliance, and one very bizarre rumour about a kickboxing reformer. Which brings us back to our dear producer, Martin Bang. Just last week, he tried to convince me that the best way to boost church attendance was to replace our choir with a team of break-dancing monks. I told him, "Martin, if you think I'm going to let you turn our sanctuary into a scene from Sister Act 2, you've got another thing coming." But you know, perhaps there's a lesson to be learned from Calvin's exile and return. Sometimes the path to progress involves a few detours and setbacks along the way, and sometimes the most unlikely ideas can lead to the most remarkable transformations. Just don't tell Martin I said that, or he'll have us all wearing neon vestments and rapping the Nicene Creed. And so, my dear flock, let us take inspiration from the life and work of John Calvin, a man who faced adversity with faith, intellect, and an unwavering commitment to his beliefs. May we all have the courage to stand firm in our convictions, even when the world around us is doing the theological splits. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go check on the communion wine. I don't trust Martin not to have replaced it with his Bangian brew when I wasn't looking. Until next time, May the grace of God be with you all, and may your liturgies be free of roundhouse kicks and breakdancing monks.
And finally, a quick look at tomorrow's headlines. The Times: Viking victory as Irish uprising fails. There's a picture there of a Viking ship. The Telegraph: youngest ever president takes office in the US. They've got a profile of Theodore Roosevelt. The Mail lead: with Northern Rock Bank run sparks panic. That's for the first time in 150 years. The Express go with cat found in Queen's bedroom. Not entirely sure what that's about. And the Mirror: new species of toad discovered in the Amazon. That's it, on the day that 300 people were left feeling rather silly after taking part in a mass game of hide-and-seek in the world's largest ball of twine. Good night.
Tune in next time for more artificially intelligent hilarity. Newsbang is a comedy show, written and recorded by AI. All voices impersonated. Nothing here is real. Good night.